A wedding invitation arrives with cruel intentions, meant to showcase a man's supposed victory over the woman he discarded. He invites his forgotten ex-wife to watch him marry the woman he left her for, expecting her to appear broken, alone, a silent confirmation of his superior choices. Instead, the doors open to reveal something no one anticipated. She enters with quiet grace, her hand resting on a visible pregnancy, beside a man whose presence commands immediate recognition, and the celebration freezes. Laughter dies, confidence shatters. The roles everyone assumed are reversed in absolute silence. This is not revenge dressed in confrontation. This is dignity answering arrogance without uttering a single word. Stay with us to witness how one invitation meant to humiliate becomes the moment that exposes everything. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. 4 years after their divorce became final, Nathan Pierce made a calculated decision. He would invite his ex-wife, Isabel Pierce, to his wedding. The choice wasn't impulsive, nor was it born from any lingering sentiment. To Nathan, it felt like the ultimate confirmation that he had chosen correctly, that his life had moved in the right direction. The invitation itself was elegant, heavy cream paper with embossed gold lettering. Nathan Pierce and Adrian Vale. Every detail spoke of success, certainty, and control. Nathan believed the card carried a message beyond its formal wording. In his mind, inviting Isabel wasn't courtesy. It was a quiet display of victory. Adrian agreed without hesitation. She was convinced Isabel remained the same woman she'd replaced 4 years ago, the woman who had signed the papers without resistance, who had walked away in silence. While selecting her wedding dress, deep burgundy lace that fit like armor, Adrian mentioned Isabel's name with faint amusement. To Adrian, the past was already conquered. Isabel belonged to it, irrelevant and forgotten. Nathan remembered the day Isabel left. He remembered the silence, the absence of pleading, the lack of tears. At the time, he'd interpreted that silence as surrender, as proof she lacked the strength he needed in a partner. Sending the invitation felt safe, even satisfying. In his certainty, Nathan assumed she would never dare appear. Isabel received the invitation on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Sunlight filtered gently through her windows as she opened the envelope without urgency. She read the card once, absorbing the names, the date, the location. Then she placed it on the table. Her face revealed no immediate reaction, no visible anger, no sudden pain. The marriage had ended long ago, and whatever emotions once tied her to Nathan had settled into something distant and still. Her hand lowered instinctively, coming to rest on the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. She took a slow, measured breath, grounding herself in the present moment. Isabel understood immediately that the invitation didn't come from goodwill. It wasn't reconciliation. Nathan wanted proof that leaving her had been the correct choice, proof that his judgment had been sound. She didn't speak about the invitation to anyone immediately. There was no impulse to seek validation or comfort. She folded the card carefully, her fingers steady and controlled. Julian Ross noticed the subtle shift in her expression when she set the invitation aside. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but he had learned to read her silences over the past 3 years. He didn't ask right away. He respected the quiet she sometimes needed. When Isabel finally spoke, her voice remained neutral. She'd been invited to her ex-husband's wedding. That was all. Julian listened without interruption, without offering unsolicited advice. His attention focused entirely on her. Isabel considered her options carefully. Attending would reopen a door she had closed with intention. Ignoring the invitation would keep that door sealed forever. Both choices carried weight. She understood that her presence would end a chapter that had never been properly concluded, not with explanations or defenses, but simply with acknowledgement that she no longer belonged to the story Nathan believed he controlled. She had no intention of proving anything to him. That need no longer existed. If she went, it would be for herself to face the past from a place of stability rather than fear. By morning, her decision was clear. She would attend. The choice didn't come from challenge or resentment. It came from the certainty that she was no longer defined by how Nathan saw her. She chose to go because she no longer feared being seen. 4 years earlier, Nathan Pierce had crossed a line long before he acknowledged it to himself. While still married to Isabel, he allowed Adrian Vale into his life, first as a colleague, then as something more deliberate, something he justified by telling himself it was inevitable. Adrian entered Nathan's world with confidence and clarity of purpose. She knew what she wanted and made no effort to hide her ambition. Nathan found that magnetic. In her presence, he felt validated in ways that fed his sense of importance. Gradually, comparison became habit. He began measuring Isabel against Adrian, often without realizing he was doing it. Isabel's quiet nature, once something he'd appreciated, now felt insufficient. He told himself she was too reserved, too passive, too content with simplicity. Nathan convinced himself that Isabel lacked the foundation he needed to advance his career and social standing. Adrian reinforced this belief with subtle consistency. She spoke of opportunities, of the life Nathan deserved, of how much more he could achieve without limitations. Her words were rarely harsh, just persuasive, softly framed, and repeated often enough to take root. When Nathan finally asked for the divorce, his tone was controlled, distant, and firm. There was no argument, no raised voice, no dramatic scene. He presented it as a conclusion already reached. Isabel listened without interruption. She didn't react with shock. She had sensed the shift long before the words were spoken. The distance between them had grown quietly, and she had recognized it for what it was. She didn't ask him to explain or justify. The clarity of his detachment made further questions unnecessary. At the time of the divorce, there were no children, no shared assets that complicated the legal process. The marriage dissolved with cold efficiency. Adrian stood behind Nathan during the signing, her posture steady, her expression composed. She watched Isabel sign and believed the outcome had secured her position permanently. Isabel signed without making demands. She took only what belonged to her and left. She didn't pause at the door. She didn't look back. That absence of hesitation unsettled Nathan more than he cared to admit, though he quickly dismissed it as confirmation of her weakness. After the divorce, Isabel severed her ties to that world deliberately. She withdrew quietly without announcement or explanation. She changed where she lived, deleted old contacts, avoided familiar places. It wasn't bitterness guiding her actions, it was clarity. Isabel also chose to conceal her true background. She came from a family of considerable wealth and influence, but she'd never leaned on that during her marriage to Nathan. She refused to use it now. She wanted to rebuild authentically, without leverage, without shortcuts. It was during this period of intentional solitude that she met Julian Ross. Their meeting was ordinary, unremarkable, no drama, no sense of fate. Julian knew nothing of Isabel's previous marriage when they met. He saw only a woman with composed presence and thoughtful clarity. Their connection began with mutual respect. There was no pressure, no pursuit shaped by urgency. Conversations were measured. Silences felt comfortable. Julian was drawn to Isabel's calm strength, the way she spoke with intention and listened with genuine care. Isabel didn't share her past immediately. She chose the right moment rather than the convenient one. Julian didn't probe or suggest she owed him explanations. He respected the boundaries she set without needing them spelled out. Slowly, trust developed through consistency, through small choices repeated over time. For the first time in years, Isabel felt truly secure, not protected or shielded, but safe in the knowledge that nothing was expected from her beyond honesty. When Isabel discovered she was pregnant, the news settled over her with calm certainty. It felt like a natural extension of the life she'd chosen, not a disruption to it. Julian remained fully present throughout, his attention unwavering, his commitment absolute. Together, they agreed to keep their relationship private, not secretive but protected. Isabel didn't want her past to define how the world viewed her present. Julian supported that choice completely. Nathan remained entirely unaware that Isabel had built a complete new life. In his mind, she was still defined by the past he remembered, silent, defeated, irrelevant. Adrian believed Isabel had vanished into obscurity. Neither imagined an outcome where Isabel existed beyond their assumptions, thriving in ways they couldn't comprehend. On the wedding day, Nathan stood in a tailored black suit, studying his reflection with satisfaction. Adrian appeared in burgundy lace, moving through the venue with absolute confidence. The hall filled with guests, business associates, society figures, carefully curated attendees. Soft music played. Floral arrangements created an atmosphere of refined elegance. To Nathan and Adrian, this moment represented their triumph. Nathan had convinced himself that inviting Isabel was harmless theater. She wouldn't show. And if she did, she'd arrive alone and diminished. Then the entrance doors opened. Isabel walked in wearing a flowing ivory dress that accommodated her visible pregnancy with elegant simplicity. Her posture was straight, her shoulders relaxed, her expression composed and serene. Beside her walked Julian Ross, wearing a charcoal suit, his presence measured and quietly authoritative. The room shifted immediately. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned in unison. The music seemed to fade on its own. Silence spread across the hall like a wave, uneven at first, then absolute and complete. Isabel's hand rested naturally on the curve of her pregnancy. The gesture was unconscious, protective, grounding. She continued forward steadily. Julian matched her rhythm perfectly, each step deliberate and calm. From across the room, Nathan saw her. Recognition struck with physical force. His body froze before his mind could process what he was seeing. Adrian felt the energy in the room shift before she understood why. Attention drained away from her entirely, flowing toward the couple at the entrance. Guests began recognizing Julian. His face, his name, they knew him from the business world they all inhabited. Whispers started quietly, spreading like wildfire. The realization moved through the crowd. Isabel hadn't arrived broken. She'd arrived complete, composed, accompanied by someone whose presence carried undeniable weight. When approached by curious guests, Julian introduced Isabel simply as his partner and the mother of his child. The words were calm, unadorned, carrying certainty without arrogance. Isabel responded with quiet restraint, offering no explanations beyond what stood visibly before them. Nathan felt something fundamental collapse inside him. The certainty he'd carried for 4 years dissolved in seconds. He realized with crushing clarity that he'd misjudged Isabel from the beginning. Her silence had never been weakness. It had been dignity. Her departure had never been defeat. It had been liberation. Adrian sensed eyes measuring her now, comparing, evaluating, finding her wanting. The confidence she'd worn so easily began to fracture. The victory she'd expected felt suddenly hollow and meaningless. No one confronted Nathan directly. No voices rose in accusation. No dramatic scene unfolded. Yet the absence of confrontation made the moment more devastating. His failure materialized in silence, witnessed by everyone, acknowledged by none. It hung in the air, undeniable and complete. Isabel didn't stay long. She understood her presence had completed its purpose simply by existing. She didn't need to explain or defend. She signaled gently to Julian. It was time to leave. They moved toward the exit together, Isabel's gaze remaining forward, steady and unwavering. She didn't turn back. She didn't glance at Nathan or Adrian. The past no longer demanded her recognition or attention. Outside, their car waited quietly at the curb. Julian opened the door with natural care, ensuring Isabel entered first. The door closed with a firm, unmistakable sound, not loud but final. That single motion sealed the moment more effectively than any words could have. Inside the hall, the celebration struggled to recover its rhythm. Music resumed awkwardly. Conversations restarted, fragmented and uncertain. Nathan stood at the center of his own wedding, feeling hollow and exposed. Adrian felt the admiration she'd expected dissolve into uncomfortable scrutiny. As their car pulled smoothly away, Isabel released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The tension that had quietly lived in her body for 4 years finally released. The past remained behind those closing doors, not erased, but contained, no longer capable of defining her future. Julian reached for her hand, his grip warm and familiar. It wasn't reassurance, it was connection, a quiet confirmation of shared resolve and genuine partnership. Isabel rested her other hand on her belly and allowed herself a small, private smile. Recovery hadn't come from revenge or confrontation. It had come from choosing peace, from building authentically, from walking away with grace rather than bitterness. Sometimes the most powerful response to those who underestimated you isn't words. It's simply living well. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever walked away from someone who couldn't see your worth, share your experience below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Sometimes we all need reminded that our value was never determined by those who failed to recognize it.